Back in early January here on the WDHA Jersey Magazine, I introduced you to Annie Rodriguez. Annie is a digital sales and marketing manager for Beasley Media. That's the company that owns WDHA and our sister station WMTR. 2 days before Christmas, Annie received the diagnosis that she had breast cancer, which is one heck of a way to end a year and start another one. And so we first spoke in late January, and now, Annie, welcome back. We want to get an update and see how things are going with you. How are you is obviously the first question we ask.
So far so good. Like I've had a lot of ups and downs in the past couple months, but I'm pushing through.
So you had a double mastectomy, bilateral mastectomy back in early February?
Yeah, February 6th. So I had
And
the bilateral one.
and where are you in terms of the treatment stage now?
Right now, actually tomorrow is my second dose of chemo. So I've started the chemo process. I will be having, so they're very aggressive with my chemo because of my age, and they want to make sure it doesn't come back. So they're kind of fighting it pretty aggressively. My first round of chemo is 8 weeks, and it's every other week. So it's 4 treatment sessions, and those are pretty strong chemos. They're the ones that are going to lose my little bit of left of hair here. So I've been through one round already. They're exhausting. It's a lot, but this next round is, I think, going to be a little bit stronger. So and anybody who's heard of chemo, they will know this is one where it's called the red devil because it's this red, it's just the color of the chemo medicine that they put in you. So that drug is like bright red. So they call it the red devil. But it's strong enough to kill anything that's left in there.
I've been following along on your blog, Pink Mama on Tap, and there's one quote from one of your doctors who said to you, "Don't worry, I've got you."
Yes.
What were your thoughts when you heard those words?
I literally cried. I was like, because she is my breast reconstruction surgeon, and she was like amazing. Like when she's like, "I got you." And it was like, when you're just sitting there in this very vulnerable state and like motions going all over, just to have someone tell me that is my surgeon telling me that they got me made me feel like just reassured that I'm in the right place. I'm with the right people. They're here to make sure I'm here for the next 20, 30, 40 years from now. So keep
when
going.
You woke up after the mastectomy, what was that like?
It was very bizarre. I've been under anesthesia before, but I didn't really realize how long the surgery had been. It had been about like 6 or 7 hours. So it was a very long surgery. So I was under for a really long time. So you're very groggy, really uncomfortable, really all over the place. But, the hospital was fantastic. The nurses God, I can't say enough about amazing hospital staff and nurses. Like nursing teams are phenomenal. So they were there to help me because I was like, I got to walk to a bathroom. I have to walk across the room. You have to do all these little things that you take for granted every day. And then I'm like loopy and I got sick and it was just lovely.
I think I had mentioned to you the last time we spoke that I had a knee replacement operation, and it's about 2.5 years ago now. And I remember them wheeling me down the hallway on the way to the operating room. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, when I get inside, I'm going to ask the doctor this, this, and this. And I get inside and they move me on the table. And the next thing I know, Annie, I'm in recovery.
That was me. When I got into the surgery, I had a few hiccups in the beginning with my IV. They had put it in, it had blown the vein in my hand. So the original one had blown. So my hand filled up before my surgery with fluid. So all the fluid just went in my hand. So I was like getting numb and I couldn't really grasp the pen to sign the release forms and all that stuff. And by the time I got into the into the ER, like, you're in the room, their surgical room, and they're talking and they're like, they're talking about, well, let's move it over here. And we're talking. And I swear I said, if there's like a 1% chance something wacky happens, I'm that 1% chance. And talking to my doctor, I have zero recollection of when I went out. And then I woke up in recovery. So I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I can handle this part. I'm like, but hours went by and I had no recollection.
Annie Rodriguez, our guest this morning here at 105.5 WDHA. As you can tell, she has a bright, bubbly personality. And I'm sure you've had some ups and downs as you've gone through these past couple of months. What's been the darkest time for you and how have you handled that?
There's been a lot of, it's a very emotional, cancer like is incredibly emotional. I go through really positive aspects of it and I was doing really well. But they had found a blood clot and that kind of like they had found a blood clot right off the bat. So they put me on blood thinners. And so I was on that and I was doing okay, but, probably about 4 weeks into my recovery, I just didn't feel right. Like I just still feel, and when you start feeling crappy, your emotions start to get the better of you. And the darkest part probably was when I almost hemorrhaged out because I mean that's a whole nother issue that came in the middle of it, and that kind of set me for a bad mental state. Like there's a lot of that where it, you know, we can talk about that in a minute, but that kind of threw me for a loop. And when I get in those things, it's been nice that I can now shower on my own because that's probably where I do most of my crying because I have 2 kids, so I don't want them to see me too vulnerable, but I don't want them to not see me vulnerable because I feel like that's important for them to see that there is a process and they're allowed to be sad. And if mommy's sad, you're allowed to be sad. So those type of things are what I try to do but I try to think of there's way worse places for me to have to be. If I can fight through this, I can fight through anything.
You know, you mentioned your kids, and that was one of the things I did want to ask you, because in addition to how are you doing, it would be how are your kids doing? How's your husband, Doug, handling all of this? Because obviously it affects you much differently than everybody else, but it does affect everybody else in your family.
That's a really big point too, Jim, because like I've been saying that to, I'm physically going through it, but my family, my extended family, they're emotionally going through a lot. So we're all kind of dealing with it in different ways. My kids have been really fantastic. For their 10 and almost 8. So they have been understanding to the point. I let them know they've seen me cry. They've seen me, and I've been very open in letting them talk to me about how they feel. I'm like, if you have any questions, just ask me. So when I had my port put in, my daughter is like, well, what's that? And I said, well, it makes it so they don't have to poke mommy anymore. And it's an easier way for no more needles in there. It goes just one little spot. So I told mom, I said, I'm like a Marvel superhero. I'm like Iron Man now. But they've been good. My daughter she's the one who's almost 8. The only thing she keeps saying is I don't want you to lose your hair. And I said, you know what? I don't want to lose my hair either, but if I have to lose my hair to make sure I'm still here, then that's what we have to do. Those doctors are telling me that this medicine's got to make me stay here. So that part that's really the biggest concern that they have. My husband's been really wonderful through everything, takes the time to be at my appointments, make sure he's there. I have my mom that lives with me. So she's been fantastic, making sure I eat because those are something that chemo takes away your appetite. But overall, I think it's been a big village that I have that are helping me and supporting me through it. So it's a lot, but everyone's making it through.
I think you alluded to this just a few moments ago, and I had to look up the word when I saw it in your blog, adenomyosis. So on top of everything else that's going on, this rears its ugly head.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners about that.
So this I actually realized I had back in October before I found out about breast cancer. It is a uterine issue. So it causes heavy bleeding. Women who are of child rearing years, so that's me, get this, especially if you've had children before. It gives you heavy bleeding. It's pretty much my uterus is growing into the muscle. So it's not very uncomfortable. It's painful periods. It's very heavy, long, extended periods. So I knew I had this. I'd already discussed it with my OB that we were probably going to do a hysterectomy this year, and then breast cancer took over. So that put on the back burner. But as I said, they put me on a blood thinner because I had a blood clot, and it was a much easier way to get rid of the blood clot, which it did, which is fantastic. It got rid of the blood clot, but it caused me to bleed continuously. So for about 36 days, I was heavy bleeding, and then I passed out in my bathroom, and my husband had to call an ambulance and they rushed me to the hospital. And this is one of those weird diseases that most people say, don't you need endometriosis? Because that's one that we always hear, but it's a very different type of disease that I have. So when they got me in, my hemoglobin was at a 7, and they told me that I should have been at a 12 to 14, and when it starts to be life-threatening is a 6.5. So I guess I didn't realize how deadly this was until I got into the hospital. And so they did, like, for 3 days they tried to control the bleeding. I was put on, I had blood transfusions, which I've never had before. So I kept having to remind everyone, I'm like, I just had a double mastectomy, so I can't move as easy as I normally would. So they did all this. I'm like, this is an abnormal case. But yeah, so I ended up with getting a surgery to stop the bleeding, and so that I can recover from it. So it was all this in my little time frame that I'm supposed to be recovering from surgery before chemo.
One thing after another. And how much does the treatment for the adenomyosis affect, if at all, your cancer treatment?
Well, the actually interesting thing is my cancer is estrogen and progesterone positive, which means the cancer cells have like little antennas that they grow with extra estrogen or extra progesterone in my system. So it's a hormonal cancer. So what will actually, in the long run, it'll be fine, because this will actually control some of the cancer coming back, because at the end of all of this, I have to be on a hormone blocker to block the estrogen. So if I get the ovaries removed, that will help reduce the amount of estrogen in my body, which will help to reduce the chance of this cancer coming back. So in a weird, bizarre way, it does help, but it definitely hindered my recovery in the beginning.
And I know you said this earlier, but how long through your chemo do you have now?
So I will be having chemo until the first week of August. I go for this first round is 8 weeks of a very high dose. It's called an AC type of chemo. And so that will be I have 4 sessions of that. And then after that is done, I'm on a 12-week weekly called Taxol. It's a different type of chemo that I will finish out for 12 weeks every week until August, the first week of August. I'm looking forward to that week.
I can imagine you are. Annie, I really appreciate you being so open with all of this. Everybody at some point or another, whether it affects them personally as it is you, or family members and friends, it affects them. Cancer affects all of us, and we deal with it at some time or another. You can follow Annie's journey along. She's very open about what's going on.
Yep.
Pink Mama on Tap. And Annie Rodriguez, thank you so much for joining us here on the Jersey Magazine, and best of luck through all of this.
Thank you so much.